Celine never expected to wake up surrounded by 20 wolf pups that weren't hers. But when she opened her eyes that frozen morning, her bedroom had become a sanctuary for an entire generation. And in the center of it all, wrapped in furs, was her 2-month-old son, in human form for the very first time. Tell me, where are you watching this story from? Because today you'll discover that some destinies announce themselves long before we're ready to hear them. The pre-dawn cold seeped through the stone walls of Northvale Palace, but Celine barely noticed anymore. After 2 years as Luna, she'd grown accustomed to waking before the sun, before the servants lit the fires, before anyone else stirred in the ancient halls. It was her time, those quiet moments before her twin sons, Asher and Ronan, woke demanding breakfast, before baby Oren needed feeding, before the responsibilities of leading a pack of 300 wolves descended upon her shoulders. She inhaled deeply, eyes still closed, savoring the last seconds of peace. Pine and snow drifted through the window she always kept cracked open, mixed with the familiar scent of her mate sleeping beside her. Leif's breathing was steady and deep, his warmth radiating across the space between them, even though they weren't touching. After all this time, she could still feel the mate bond humming between them like a living thing, comfortable and constant. But something was different this morning. Weight pressed against her legs, small bodies, many of them, warm and breathing in synchronized rhythm. The familiar puppy smell of her sons in their wolf forms filled her nose, but there was more. Layers of scents she didn't recognize, foreign yet somehow belonging. Celine's eyes snapped open. Her breath caught in her throat. The bed was covered in white wolf pups. Not just covered, drowning. They lay sprawled across the furs, curled against her sides, tucked into the crook of her knees, piled at the foot of the bed like snowdrifts. Moonlight filtered through the window, turning their pale coats silver. She counted without meaning to. 7 near her feet, 4 along her left side, 3 pressed against her back, more scattered across Leif's side of the bed, though he slept on, oblivious. 20. There were 20 wolf pups in her bedroom. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she carefully pushed herself up on one elbow, trying not to disturb them. The pup nearest her head, a tiny thing no bigger than her forearm, yawned in its sleep, revealing needle-sharp baby teeth. She recognized the silver-tipped ears. This was one of the palace guard's pups, born just 3 weeks ago to Beta Marcus and his mate. But why was he here? Celine's gaze swept across the sea of small bodies, picking out familiar markings. 2 belonged to the Ironwood Patrol. Another 3 bore the distinctive dark-tipped tails of the mountain pack families. The rest she couldn't place immediately, but they were all Northvale wolves. All pack. All impossibly inside her private chambers. Her hands moved instinctively, checking for her own sons. Asher and Ronan should be in their beds across the room. They'd graduated to their own sleeping space months ago, though they still shifted into wolf form most nights. She found them easily enough, recognizing Asher's slightly larger build and Ronan's habit of sleeping with one paw over his nose. But Oren, where was Oren? Panic flared hot in her chest. Her 2-month-old baby, who couldn't even hold his head up properly yet, who'd never shifted, who slept in the carved bassinet beside her bed every single night. The bassinet was empty. Leif. Her voice came out sharp, cutting through the pre-dawn silence. Leif, wake up. Beside her, the Alpha King of Northvale Pack stirred. He made a low sound of protest, the kind he always made when she woke him before dawn. But then his eyes opened. Ice blue, alert despite the early hour. His gaze found hers first, reading the tension in her face, then followed her line of sight down. He went completely still. What in the moon's name? He breathed. I don't know. Celine was already moving, carefully extracting herself from the pile of sleeping pups. They stirred but didn't wake, unconsciously pressing closer to fill the space she left behind. They were here when I woke up. All of them. I don't know how they got in, I don't know why they're here, but Leaf, I can't find Oren." That got him moving. Leaf rolled out of bed with the fluid grace that came from centuries of wolf genetics, his bare feet silent on the stone floor. He was already scanning the room, nostrils flaring as he searched for their son's scent. Celine dropped to her knees beside the bassinet, as if Oren might somehow be hiding in the empty bedding. The lamb's wool blanket she'd tucked around him last night lay undisturbed. The carved wooden wolves that decorated the sides stared at her with blank eyes. "Celine." Something in Leaf's voice made her look up. He stood at the foot of the bed, staring down at the pile of pups with an expression she couldn't read. Slowly, he reached into the center of the pile and lifted something wrapped in furs. Not something. Someone. A baby. Human. Tiny fists curled against a round face, dark hair soft as silk against pink skin. Even from across the room, she could see the steady rise and fall of his chest, the slight flutter of his eyelids as he dreamed. "That's not possible," Selina whispered. But she was already moving toward them, already reaching out with hands that trembled. Because she knew that face. She'd memorized every curve of those cheeks, the exact shape of that nose, the way his upper lip curved in a tiny bow. "Oren," she breathed, and took her son from Leaf's arms. He was warm and solid and real, smelling of milk and baby and pack, completely human, completely healthy. Sleeping peacefully despite being surrounded by 20 wolf pups who shouldn't have been able to enter their chambers without triggering every security measure in the palace. He shifted. Leaf's voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Our 2-month-old son shifted for the first time, and we didn't even wake up." Celine pressed her lips to Oren's forehead, breathing him in, assuring herself he was unharmed. His skin was warm, his heartbeat steady. She felt along his tiny body with practiced maternal efficiency, checking for any sign of distress or injury. Shifting for the first time was supposed to hurt. The bones realigning, the body transforming from one shape to another. Adult wolves remembered their first shift as agony. But Oren slept on, peaceful as ever. "This isn't normal," she said quietly. "Leaf, this isn't normal. Pups don't shift until they're at least 6 months old. Most don't manage it until they're a year or more. I know. And they certainly don't shift in their sleep without crying or—" She cut herself off, finally looking at the 20 other pups covering their bed. "And they don't summon an entire nursery's worth of wolves to their bedroom." Leaf moved closer, one hand settling on the small of her back. The touch grounded her, reminded her to breathe. Through the mate bond, she felt his concern mixing with something else. Not quite pride, but close. Wonder, maybe. "Look at them," he said softly. "Really look." Celine forced herself to study the sleeping pups more carefully. They weren't randomly scattered. She could see that now. They formed a loose circle around where Oren had been lying, their bodies creating a protective barrier. The largest ones, including Asher and Ronan, positioned themselves on the outside. The smallest, like Beta Marcus's newborn, tucked themselves closest to the center. A guard formation. They came to protect him, she realized aloud. When he shifted, they came to protect him. Yes. Leaf's hand moved to cradle the back of Oren's head, his large palm completely engulfing their son's skull. The question is why? Why would a 2-month-old's first shift trigger a protection response from every pup in the palace? The answer sat heavy between them, unspoken, but understood. Celine had grown up on the old stories, the legends passed down through generations of North Vale wolves. She'd heard about the ancient alphas, the ones born with power so great that the pack recognized them before they could even walk. The ones who could command loyalty with a look, who could call their wolves to them without words. True alphas, born leaders, the kind that only appeared once in several generations. "We need to call the elders," Leaf said quietly. Celine nodded. unable to tear her gaze away from Oren's sleeping face. He looked so normal. So small and helpless, and entirely too young to be anything other than a baby who needed his mother. But the 20 wolves on their bed told a different story. One by one, the pups began to stir. The smallest whimpered first, a tiny sound of confusion. Then another woke, and another, until the bed became a writhing mass of white fur and sleepy yips. Asher and Ronan were among the first to fully wake, their wolf forms stretching and shaking off sleep before they noticed their parents standing beside the bed. Asher's tail started wagging immediately. Ronan let out a happy yip and tried to launch himself at Leaf's legs, forgetting he was tangled in with 6 other pups. The resulting tumble made 3 others wake with startled yelps. "Easy, easy," Celine soothed, shifting Oren to one arm so she could reach out with her free hand. "You're all okay. Everyone's okay." But they weren't all okay with waking up somewhere strange. Beta Marcus's pup let out a frightened howl, confused and calling for his mother. 2 others joined in, their baby voices high and distressed. Within seconds, the chamber filled with the cacophony of confused, frightened wolf pups. And through it all, Oren slept. Celine bounced him gently, instinctively trying to soothe even though he showed no signs of waking. Around her, chaos erupted. Leif was trying to calm the frightened pups, his alpha presence radiating outward in waves meant to comfort. It helped, the howling cut off, replaced by uncertain whimpers. But 20 scared babies were still 20 scared babies. The door burst open. Beta Marcus skidded to a stop in the doorway, wild-eyed and frantic. His mate Helena pushed past him a second later, her dark hair loose from sleep. They weren't the only ones. More parents crowded behind them, drawn by the sound of their pups' distress. "Luna," Marcus panted, his gaze finding his tiny son among the pile. "We heard. I don't understand. He was in his cradle. I swear he was in his cradle. And then he was just gone." "It's all right," Celine assured him, though she had no idea if that was true. "They're all safe. They're just confused." Helena had already pushed into the room, scooping up her pup and holding him close. The little one buried his nose in her neck, whimpering softly. One by one, other parents entered to collect their children, murmuring apologies and confusion in equal measure. "I put her to bed in the nursery," one mother said, clutching her daughter. "I checked 3 times. She was sleeping. I know she was sleeping." "Mine too," another father confirmed. "And our door was locked from the inside. There's no way he could have gotten out on his own." Leif exchanged a long look with Celine over the chaos. She knew what he was thinking because she was thinking it too. These pups hadn't escaped from locked rooms and navigated through palace corridors to reach the royal chambers. They'd been called, summoned by something they couldn't resist, summoned by Oren. Within 10 minutes, the room had cleared of all but their own family. Asher and Ronan had shifted back to human form, something they'd only recently mastered, and stood naked and shivering by the fireplace while Celine wrapped them in blankets. They were 2 years old, small for their age, but bright-eyed and aware. "Why all the babies?" Ronan asked, accepting the blanket with chubby hands. "We're not sure yet, sweetheart." Celine pressed a kiss to his dark hair, so like Leif's. "But everyone's safe. That's what matters." Asher peered at his baby brother, still cradled in Celine's arm. "Oren different?" The question caught her off guard. She shouldn't have been surprised. Asher had always been perceptive, even before he could form full sentences. But hearing him voice what she'd been thinking made it real in a way that frightened her. "Different how?" she asked carefully. Asher frowned, searching for words he didn't quite have yet. His small hand reached out to touch Oren's tiny fist. "Smells like moon." Leif went very still. Celine felt it through the bond, the sudden spike of his attention. "What do you mean he smells like moon, Ash?" Leif crouched down to his son's level, voice gentle but serious. But Asher had already lost interest, distracted by Ronan pulling at his blanket. The boys tumbled to the floor in a wrestling match that was more giggles than aggression, and the moment passed. Celine met Leaf's eyes over their sons' heads. His jaw was tight, worry lines creasing his forehead. He looked exactly how she felt, like the ground had shifted beneath them, and they weren't sure where they'd land. "The elders," she said quietly. "Now." He nodded and rose, already moving toward the door. "I'll send for them. And Celine?" He paused, one hand on the doorframe. "Don't let him out of your sight." As if she would. She held Oren closer, feeling his small body relax against her chest. This was her baby, her youngest son. The child she'd carried and birthed and nursed for 2 months. She knew every sound he made, every expression, every need. But she didn't know this, didn't understand how or why he'd shifted so impossibly young, or what it meant that he'd called an army of pups to protect him. She carried Oren to the window seat and settled there, looking out over the snow-covered courtyard. Dawn was breaking now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The palace was waking up. Soon everyone would know what had happened. Soon whispers would spread. The Luna's sun shifted at 2 months old. The pups came to him. He's different. Celine rested her cheek against Oren's soft hair and tried not to be afraid of what different might mean. By the time the 3 elders arrived, Celine had fed Oren, changed him, and somehow managed to get both Asher and Ronan dressed and fed as well. The twins were playing with wooden wolves by the fire, occasionally shifting into pup form and back again with the careless ease of toddlers who hadn't yet learned to be impressed by their own abilities. Oren remained human and sleepy, his dark eyes tracking movement with the unfocused attention of a very young baby. If not for the 20 pups who'd surrounded him earlier, Celine might have convinced herself she'd dreamed the whole thing. But she hadn't. And the elders' faces when they entered the chamber told her they already knew. Elder Rune came first, her silver hair braided with ceremonial beads that clicked softly as she moved. She was the oldest wolf in North Vale, old enough to remember when Leaf's grandfather ruled. Her eyes, still sharp despite her age, went immediately to Oren. Elder Tormund followed, his massive frame filling the doorway. He'd been a warrior in his youth, and his body still carried the scars. Now he served as the keeper of pack law and tradition. Last came Elder Astrid, barely 50, but considered an elder for her knowledge of wolf magic and ancient ways. Her gifts ran deep, touching places most wolves couldn't reach. Leaf stood as they entered, offering the traditional respect due to pack elders. Celine remained seated, Oren in her arms, because she wasn't about to put her son down for anyone. "Luna," Rune said warmly, though concern creased her weathered face. "We came as quickly as we could." "Thank you." Celine's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I assume you've heard what happened. Half the palace has heard by now." Tormund's deep voice rumbled like distant thunder. 20 pups disappearing from their beds and reappearing in the royal chambers tends to cause talk. "They didn't disappear," Leaf said quietly. "They were called." Astrid moved closer, her gaze locked on Oren with an intensity that made Celine's arms tighten protectively. "May I?" Every maternal instinct Celine possessed screamed no, but she was Luna of North Vale, and these were her pack's elders. She trusted them. She had to trust them. She nodded. Astrid knelt beside the window seat, bringing herself to eye level with the baby. She didn't reach out to touch him, just studied his face with the kind of attention most people reserved for precious artifacts. Oren stared back, making the small cooing sounds that meant he was content. "He shifted last night," Astrid said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Celine swallowed hard. "We didn't even know it happened. We woke up to find him human, surrounded by pups." "How old is he?" 2 months, 8 weeks exactly." Astrid glanced at Rune, something passing between them that Selene couldn't read. And the shift happened without distress? No crying? He slept through it. As far as we can tell, he's been sleeping peacefully all night. Impossible, Tormund muttered. I've seen grown warriors pass out from the pain of their first shift. A baby is not impossible, Rune interrupted gently. Just rare. Very, very rare. The way she said it made Selene's stomach drop. She'd heard that tone before, the weight of knowledge too heavy to speak casually. What does it mean? Leif asked, moving to stand behind Selene's seat. His hand found her shoulder, solid and reassuring. Why would a 2-month-old shift? Why would other pups respond to it? Rune exchanged looks with the other elders before settling into one of the chairs near the fire. Asher immediately abandoned his toys and climbed into her lap, comfortable with the elders' presence. She smiled and adjusted him automatically, her gnarled hands gentle. There are old stories, she began, from before the packs fractured, when all wolves ran under the same moon. Stories of children born with such strong alpha blood that they commanded loyalty before they could walk. True alphas, we called them. Leif is a true alpha, Selene said. He was born to be Alpha King. Yes, Rune agreed. But there are degrees to these things, child. Your mate was born with alpha blood from a long line of leaders. His wolf is strong, his presence undeniable. But what we're talking about is something different, something more primal. Astrid spoke up from her position beside Selene. When a true alpha is born, the kind the old stories speak of, their first shift is said to send out a pulse, a call that every wolf in the territory can feel, even if they don't understand it. It's instinctive, protective. The pack recognizes their future leader and moves to protect them. At 2 months old? Selene's voice shook despite her best efforts. You're saying my baby carried out an alpha command without meaning to, Astrid finished gently. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. The room fell silent. Even Asher and Ronan seemed to sense the weight of the moment, playing more quietly than usual. Selene looked down at Orin, who had started to drift off again, his small mouth working in the way that meant he was dreaming. He looked so normal, so helpless and small, and entirely too young to be anything other than what he appeared to be. What does this mean for him? She asked quietly. For his future? It means he'll be powerful, Tormund said bluntly. More powerful than any alpha we've seen in generations. Possibly more powerful than even our Alpha King. Leif's hand tightened on Selene's shoulder, but his voice remained calm. That's not necessarily a bad thing. No, Rune agreed, but it's not simple either. Power like this draws attention, challenges. Those who would seek to control him or remove him as a threat. He's a baby. Selene's voice turned sharp, protective. He's 2 months old. Who would threaten a baby? The elders exchanged glances again. This time it was Astrid who answered. Other packs. Rogues looking for a powerful wolf to lead them. Rival alphas who see a future threat. She held up a hand before Selene could protest. I'm not saying this to frighten you, Luna. I'm telling you so you can protect him. Knowledge is armor. What do we do? Leif asked. For now, nothing changes. Rune adjusted Asher in her lap as the boy started to squirm. He's still a baby. He still needs his mother and father. Let him grow. Love him. Protect him as you would regardless. But watch him, Tormund added. Pay attention to how other wolves react to him. Notice if strange things happen around him. Keep records. And most importantly, Astrid said, finally reaching out to gently touch one tiny hand. Teach him control. When he's older, when his wolf begins to truly emerge, he'll need to learn to manage this power. An alpha command from a child could be dangerous if not properly guided. Orin's small fingers wrapped around Astrid's thumb, holding on with surprising strength. The elder smiled. He has good instincts, she murmured, and he has both of you. That will matter more than power or prophecy or any of the old stories. Celine wanted to believe that, wanted to think that love and family would be enough to keep her son safe from whatever might come. But she'd lived long enough in the world of wolves to know that power always attracted trouble. There's something else. Rune's voice turned serious. This will get out. Other packs will hear about a true alpha born to North Vale. Some will see it as a blessing, others as a threat. You'll need to be prepared for visitors, challenges, political maneuvering. Let them come, Leif said, and his voice carried the weight of centuries of alpha dominance. Any wolf who comes for my son will answer to me. Despite everything, Celine felt a flutter of warmth through the mate bond. This was why she'd chosen him, why the bond had snapped into place the moment they'd met. Leif's strength wasn't just physical or magical. It was the absolute certainty that he would protect his pack, his family, with everything he had. Good, Rune said with satisfaction. She lifted Asher off her lap and stood, the other elders rising with her. Then we'll leave you to process this, but Celine? She waited until the Luna looked up. That boy will do great things. Don't let fear of what might come steal the joy of what is. After the elders left, Celine sat in the sudden quiet of their chambers, Oren still sleeping peacefully against her chest. Through the window, she could see the palace coming fully alive. Wolves in human and animal form moved through the courtyard, going about their morning routines. Normal. Everything looked so normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Talk to me. Leif settled beside her on the window seat, one arm wrapping around her shoulders. I can feel your worry through the bond. She leaned into him, grateful for the solid warmth of his presence. I'm terrified, she admitted quietly. He's so small, Leif. He's barely old enough to hold his head up, and we're talking about alpha commands and power and pack politics. I know. What if we can't protect him? What if something happens because of what he is? Then we'll handle it. Leif pressed a kiss to her temple, his breath warm against her skin. Together, like we handle everything. Celine closed her eyes, trying to absorb his certainty. They'd faced challenges before. Political marriages attempted by neighboring packs, rogue attacks, the hard work of earning respect as Luna when she'd come from a smaller pack with less prestigious bloodlines. They'd weathered all of it. But this felt different. This was their child. He's still just Oren, Leif said softly, as if reading her thoughts. Still our son. Still the baby who cries when he's hungry and falls asleep on your shoulder. Nothing the elders said changes that. Everything the elders said changes that. No. Leif's hand moved to cradle Oren's head, his touch infinitely gentle. It just means we know more about him than we did yesterday. He was always going to be powerful. He's our son. But he's also still 2 months old and needs his mother. As if to prove the point, Oren stirred and began to fuss, the tiny whimpers that meant he'd be crying in earnest soon. Celine adjusted him automatically, preparing to nurse, and felt the familiar rush of maternal love that had nothing to do with power or prophecy. Leif was right. This was still her baby. Still the small, warm weight in her arms who depended on her for everything. The rest, the power, the politics, the complications, would come later. Right now, her son needed to eat and sleep and be held. Right now, she could just be his mother. She caught Leif watching her as she nursed, his ice-blue eyes soft in a way they rarely were for anyone but her and their sons. Even after 2 years, even after everything they'd been through, he still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. What? She asked, smiling despite everything. Just thinking about how lucky I am. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. You're incredible with them, all 3 of them. They're easy to love. They're also exhausting, chaotic, and cover our bed in mysterious pups. He grinned. And you handle it all like it's nothing. I don't feel like I'm handling it. Celine glanced at the messy room, at Asher and Ronan now building some kind of fort out of blankets and pillows. I feel like I'm constantly one disaster away from falling apart. That's called being a mother. Leaf leaned in and kissed her softly, carefully, mindful of the baby between them. And you're the best one our sons could have. The words settled something in her chest. Not the fear, that was still there, probably always would be where her children were concerned, but the immediate panic. Whatever challenges came because of Oren's power, they'd face them, together. I love you, she said quietly. I love you too. Leaf stood, stretching. Now, I need to go address the pack before rumors get completely out of control. Will you be all right here? We'll be fine. Celine looked at their sons, Oren nursing contentedly, Asher and Ronan creating architecture from bedding. Go, do the alpha thing. We'll hold down the fort. He kissed her once more, then ruffled both twins' hair on his way out. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Celine was alone with her boys. Alone, but not afraid. Whatever came next, they would face it, as a family. For now, that was enough. The afternoon brought what Celine should have expected, a steady stream of pack members wanting to see Oren to assess this child who'd called their pups to him. She received them in the family sitting room rather than the formal receiving chamber, a subtle message that while she understood their curiosity, her son was still just a baby. Beta Marcus came first with Helena, properly requesting an audience. Their small pup, the one who'd been among the 20, rode in Helena's arms, contentedly gnawing on a piece of leather. Luna, Marcus said, bowing his head in respect. We wanted to thank you for caring for Finn this morning. And to... He hesitated. To see if the young prince was well. Translation. To see if Oren was some kind of threat to their own child. Celine understood. She'd have felt the same in their position. Oren is perfectly healthy, she assured them, adjusting her son in her arms so they could see his face. He was awake now, dark eyes tracking the movement around him with baby-appropriate interest. And your Finn helped protect him during his first shift. We're grateful. Helena visibly relaxed. He did? All 20 pups formed a protective circle. Your son was one of the closest to Oren. It's an honor, Helena. Truly. And it was, even if the circumstances were terrifying. The elders had explained that pups who responded to an alpha call like that would likely form the core of Oren's future pack, bonded to him in ways that transcended normal pack ties. Finn would grow up alongside her son, would probably serve as one of his most trusted wolves, if they survived to adulthood, if power didn't consume them all first. Celine pushed the dark thoughts away and smiled. Would you like to bring Finn closer? Helena glanced at Marcus, who nodded. Carefully, she approached and lowered her pup so he could see Oren. For a moment, both babies simply stared at each other with that intense concentration unique to the very young. Then Finn reached out one chubby hand and patted Oren's cheek. Oren's face scrunched up, considering this development. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled, a real smile, not just gas, and made a happy cooing sound. Well, Marcus said, grinning, I guess they're friends. More families came throughout the afternoon, some nervous, some curious, all respectful. Celine received them all with patience, letting them see that Oren was just a baby, not some fearsome creature to be afraid of. Gradually, the tension in the palace began to ease. By the time Leaf returned from his pack meetings, Celine was exhausted. Oren had fallen asleep against her shoulder, but Asher and Ronan were in full toddler chaos mode, chasing each other around the sitting room and occasionally shifting mid-run just because they could. Rough afternoon? Leif asked, catching Ronan as he nearly collided with a table. Educational, Celine replied. Half the pack wanted to meet their future leader. The other half wanted to make sure he wasn't going to command their children into dangerous situations. And what did you tell them? That he's 2 months old and currently drooling on my shoulder, so I think we're safe for now." Leif laughed, the sound rich and warm. He deposited Ronan safely on the floor and crossed to press a kiss to Celine's forehead. "You're incredible." "I'm tired." "That too." He held out his arms. "Give him here. Go take a bath. I'll handle bedtime for all three." Celine wanted to protest. She was their mother. Bedtime was her responsibility. But the thought of hot water and quiet was too tempting. She transferred Oren carefully, watching as Leif cradled their smallest son with practiced ease. He was such a good father. Not something she'd have predicted from the stern alpha king she'd first met 2 years ago, but fatherhood had softened him in the best ways. He could be commanding and fierce in the pack hall, but here, with their sons, he was gentle and patient and entirely devoted. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For being exactly who we need." His expression melted into something so tender it made her chest ache. "Go. Relax. We'll still be here when you're done." The bath was heaven. Celine sank into the hot water and felt her muscles unknot one by one. Through the door, she could hear Leif managing the bedtime chaos, Asher arguing about having to shift back to human form to wear pajamas, Ronan singing some nonsense song, Oren's occasional baby sounds, her family, her chaotic, complicated, perfect family. Eventually, the sounds quieted. Leif must have gotten all 3 boys settled. Celine allowed herself another few minutes of peace before climbing out and drying off. She pulled on a soft sleeping gown and padded barefoot back to their chambers. The scene that greeted her stopped her in the doorway. Leif sat in the large chair near the fireplace, Oren cradled in one arm while he read from a leather-bound book. Asher and Ronan were curled on the floor at his feet, already half asleep, lulled by their father's deep voice and the warmth of the fire. "And so the great wolf carried the moon in his jaws," Leif read, "not to consume it, but to protect it from the darkness that sought to steal its light. For he knew that without the moon, his children would be lost." It was an old pack story, one Celine remembered from her own childhood. Leif's voice wrapped around the familiar words, making them sound like poetry. He looked up as she entered, smiling. "Better? Much." She crossed the room and settled on the arm of his chair, one hand automatically moving to touch Oren's soft hair. "They look peaceful. For now. Give it 5 minutes, and someone will need water or have a bad dream or shift unexpectedly." But his voice was full of affection, not complaint. This was their life now. Interrupted sleep, constant chaos, never a moment of true quiet. And neither of them would trade it for anything. Oren stirred, making the small sounds that meant he'd be hungry soon. Celine took him from Leif and settled into the chair properly, beginning the familiar routine of nursing. Leif shifted to give her room, but stayed close, one arm around her shoulders. "The pack is calm," he said quietly, so as not to disturb Asher and Ronan. "Curious, but not afraid. Word is spreading that the young prince is blessed, not cursed." "Good. But there's news from the Southern Territories. Alpha Garrett sent a message. He's heard about Oren and wants to come pay his respects." Celine's hand tightened on her son. Garrett was young, ambitious, and always looking for ways to expand his influence. A true alpha born in North Vale would be extremely interesting to someone like him. "When?" she asked. 3 days. "What does he really want?" "To assess the threat, to see if he can make an alliance, to gather information." Leif's voice hardened slightly. "To see if there's any way to use this to his advantage." "He's not coming near Oren. He won't get the chance." Leif's arm tightened around her. "We'll have him for a formal dinner, show appropriate hospitality, and keep our sons far away from his curious eyes." It wouldn't be enough. Alphas like Garrett always found ways to get what they wanted, but they had 3 days to prepare, and Celine was Luna of North Vale. She'd learned to navigate pack politics. She'd protect her son from all of it. "We should sleep," Leif said eventually, once Oren had finished eating and fallen back asleep. While we can. They transferred all 3 boys to their beds, Asher and Ronan together in theirs, Oren in his bassinet. For tonight, Celine positioned the bassinet right against her side of the bed, close enough that she could reach out and touch him without getting up. Leif said nothing, just wrapped his arms around her once they were both settled under the furs. "It's going to be okay," he murmured against her hair. "Whatever comes, we'll handle it." Celine wanted to believe him, but as she drifted off to sleep, one hand still resting on the edge of Oren's bassinet, all she could think about were the 20 pups who'd answered her son's unconscious call. Power like that changed everything. Celine woke to crying. Not unusual. Oren still needed to eat every few hours, and her body had learned to rouse at his first sounds of distress. But this cry was different, higher, more urgent, edged with something that sent ice through her veins. She was out of bed before fully conscious, reaching for her son. The bassinet was empty. Panic flared bright and hot until she heard Leif's voice, low and soothing, from the other side of the bed. "It's all right, little one. Papa's got you." Celine rounded the bed to find Leif standing by the window, Oren in his arms. Even in the dim light, she could see her son's distress, his little face red, mouth open in wails that seemed too big for such a small body. "What's wrong?" She reached for him instinctively, needing to feel him in her arms. "I don't know. He just started crying." Leif transferred Oren carefully, his brow furrowed with concern. "He doesn't feel warm. I checked his wrappings. I don't think anything's wrong, but he won't settle." Celine cradled Oren against her chest, swaying gently. The bond between mother and child thrummed with his distress, but she couldn't sense pain, just agitation, discomfort, something not quite right in his small world. "Shh, sweetheart," she murmured, pressing her lips to his forehead. "Mama's here. You're okay." But Oren continued to cry, small fists clenched, body rigid with infant rage. Then he shifted. One moment, Celine held a human baby. The next, her arms were full of white fur and puppy-soft ears. The transformation happened so fast she barely registered it. No pain, no struggle, just a seamless change from one form to another. The crying stopped immediately. Oren the wolf pup blinked up at her with eyes that were the same dark color as his human form. His tail gave a single wag before he yawned, revealing tiny pointed teeth, and settled against her chest with a contented sound. "Well," Leif said, after a long moment, "that's new." Celine could only stare at the white bundle of fur in her arms. This was her son, her 2-month-old baby, who had just shifted forms like it was the most natural thing in the world, because for him, apparently, it was. He was uncomfortable, she realized aloud, in his human form, so he shifted to the form that felt better. At will, without distress. Leif reached out to stroke one soft ear. "The elders said true alphas have exceptional control, but this is our son," Celine finished, "being extraordinary." They stood there in the moonlight, staring at the sleeping wolf pup. Outside, the palace was quiet. Asher and Ronan slept on, undisturbed. Everything was normal except for the miracle sleeping in Celine's arms. "We should tell the elders," Leif said eventually. "In the morning." Celine carried Oren back to bed, settling against the pillows with her pup son cradled close. "For now, let's just let him be." Leif climbed in beside her, arranging the furs so they covered all 3 of them. One large hand rested on Oren's small body, his touch gentle. "He's going to be remarkable," Leif said softly. "He already is." They lay in the darkness, neither sleeping, both watching their youngest son breathe. Celine waited for fear to creep back in, for worry about what this new development meant. But instead, she felt something else. Pride. Her son was powerful, extraordinary. special in ways that maybe even the elders didn't fully understand yet. And yes, that would bring challenges, but it would also bring greatness. Oren shifted again in his sleep, this time back to human form. The transformation was just as smooth, just as painless. He settled with a small sigh, one tiny hand curling around Celine's finger. "I love you," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to her son or her mate or both. "Whatever you become, whoever you grow into, I love you." Leaf's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. Through the mate bond, she felt his love, his pride, his own complicated tangle of hope and fear for their son's future. "We're going to be okay," he said, and this time Selene believed him. They were a family. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. For now, that was everything. Morning brought Elder Astrid to their chambers before breakfast, her expression grave. Selene had just finished nursing Oren, in human form this time, though she half expected him to shift mid-feeding, when the elder arrived. "He shifted again," Astrid said. "It wasn't a question. How did you know?" "I felt it. All the elders did." She approached slowly, studying Oren with that intense focus. "May I hold him?" Selene wanted to say no, but she nodded. Astrid took Oren with practiced care, cradling him as she walked to the window. Light streamed across his face, and for just a moment, Selene could swear his eyes reflected it differently than they should. "What do you see?" Leaf asked, standing beside Selene with one protective hand at her back. "Potential," Astrid said simply, "and power. So much power." She looked at them seriously. "You need to understand what you're dealing with. This child doesn't just have strong alpha blood. He has what we call lunar affinity, a connection to the moon itself that goes beyond what normal wolves experience." "What does that mean?" Selene asked. "It means his shifts will be effortless, his healing rapid, his ability to command absolute." Astrid pressed a kiss to Oren's forehead, a gesture of respect. "It also means he'll need careful guidance. Power like this without control could be dangerous." "He's 2 months old," Leaf said tightly. "He's not dangerous." "No, but he will be. In a good way or bad way depends entirely on how he's raised." Astrid returned Oren to Selena's arms. "Love him, teach him. Show him that power is responsibility, not just strength. And most importantly, let him be a child. Don't let fear of what he might become steal the joy of what he is." The same advice Rune had given. Let him be a child. "We will," Selene promised. After Astrid left, Selene found herself back at the window, Oren in her arms, watching the pack move through the courtyard below. Asher and Ronan were with the nursery attendants, playing with other pups their age. Normal, happy, carefree. Could Oren have that too? Could he be both extraordinary and ordinary? "Talk to me." Leaf appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around both of them. "I can feel you worrying." "I want him to have a normal childhood," she admitted. "I want him to play and make friends and not have the weight of pack expectations on his shoulders before he can even walk." "Then we give him that." Leaf rested his chin on top of her head. "We protect him from the politics and the prophecies and all of it. We let him be Oren. Just Oren. Can we? Really? We can try." His arms tightened, and we have each other. That counts for something. It counted for everything. Selene turned in his embrace, careful of Oren between them, and kissed her mate properly. He responded immediately, one hand cupping her face, deepening the kiss until her toes curled. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," she said again, because it bore repeating. "Thank you for being my partner in all of this." "Always." Leaf pressed another quick kiss to her lips, then one to Oren's head. "Now come on, we have a pack to lead and sons to raise. The rest will figure itself out." He was right. They would take it one day at a time, one challenge at a time. They would love their sons and protect them and teach them. They would be parents first, Luna and Alpha second. And somehow, they would make it work. 3 days passed in a blur of normal chaos. Asher learned to count to 10. Ronan mastered the art of climbing onto furniture he shouldn't. Oren shifted between forms with increasing ease, seeming to prefer his wolf pup body for sleeping and his human form for eating. The pack adjusted to their extraordinary young prince with remarkable grace. Pups visited daily to play with Asher and Ronan, and several always ended up near Oren, as if drawn by some invisible thread, the connections forming before he could even understand what they meant. Then Alpha Garrett arrived. He came with a small contingent, just enough wolves to be respectful, not so many it could be seen as aggressive. Celine watched from the palace steps as they entered the courtyard, Leaf solid and imposing beside her. Garrett himself was younger than Leaf, perhaps 30, with the kind of confident swagger that came from never having been truly challenged. His eyes swept the courtyard, taking in every detail, assessing everything. "Alpha Leaf," he said, bowing his head the appropriate amount. "Thank you for your hospitality." "Alpha Garrett, welcome to Northvale." Leaf's voice carried the weight of ancient authority. "I trust your journey was pleasant." "Very." Garrett's gaze slid to Celine, and she felt his wolf press against her consciousness, testing. "Luna Celine, you're as beautiful as the rumors claim." It was meant to be flattering but felt assessing. Celine smiled coolly and inclined her head, not giving him the satisfaction of a verbal response. Leaf's hand found the small of her back, a gesture of possession and protection. "Come, we've prepared chambers for you and your wolves." They processed into the palace, following protocol. Celine felt Garrett's attention on her the entire way, studying, calculating. She kept her expression serene, her posture perfect. She'd learned early that being Luna meant being a symbol as much as a person. But inside, her wolf snarled. She didn't want this male anywhere near her territory, her pack, her family, especially her sons. The formal dinner that evening was an exercise in careful diplomacy. Garrett sat across from Leif and Celine, making appropriate conversation about territory boundaries and trade agreements. But his real questions came wrapped in casual observations. "I hear congratulations are in order," he said over the third course. 3 sons. That's quite a legacy." "We're blessed," Celine replied carefully. "And the youngest is how old now?" 2 months. Remarkable. Garrett sipped his wine, watching them over the rim. "I heard something interesting about him. Something about pups gathering in unusual circumstances?" There it was, the real reason for his visit. Leaf's hand found Celine's under the table, squeezing gently. "Pack matters," he said firmly. "Nothing that concerns anyone outside Northvale." Of course. But Garrett's smile said he wasn't convinced. "Still, it's always interesting when something unusual happens. Makes one wonder what it might mean for future pack dynamics." "It means," Celine said clearly, "that my son is blessed by the moon, as all alpha-born children are. Nothing more, nothing less." It was a lie, and they all knew it. But it was the official story, and Garrett would have to accept it or openly challenge their authority. He chose acceptance, but Celine could see the calculation in his eyes. He would be watching Oren, reporting back to his pack, spreading word to other territories. Her son was now a point of interest across all wolfkind. The thought made her want to grab her children and run. Instead, she smiled and made polite conversation about the weather. By the time Garrett and his wolves departed the next day, Celine was exhausted from maintaining perfect composure. She watched their party disappear down the mountain road and finally allowed herself to breathe. "He'll tell everyone," she said quietly. "I know." Leaf's arm came around her waist. "Let him. The more attention on Oren now, while he's too young to understand, the more normal it will seem as he grows. We're controlling the narrative. Are we? Or is the narrative controlling us? Leif turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Listen to me. Oren is our son. No political maneuvering, no pack curiosity, no prophecy changes that. We decide how to raise him. We decide what he learns and when. We protect him from everything we can and prepare him for what we can't. And if it's not enough, then we adapt. We're his parents, Selene. That's the most powerful thing we can be. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty. He was right. They were Oren's parents, Luna and Alpha of North Vale. That meant something. That meant everything. That night, after Asher and Ronan were asleep and Oren was fed and changed, Selene found herself back at the window with her youngest son. Leif joined her, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise over the mountains. "Do you remember the first time you shifted?" Leif asked quietly. "Barely. I was 6. It hurt so much I thought I was dying." Selene looked down at Oren, currently in wolf pup form and sleeping peacefully. "He doesn't even cry." "Because he's meant for this. Born for it." Leif reached out to stroke one soft ear. "I used to think being Alpha King was the most important thing I'd ever do. Building this pack, maintaining peace, ensuring our territory's safety, but watching him..." He trailed off, emotion thick in his voice. "Watching him what?" "Watching him become whoever he's meant to be is going to be the greatest thing I ever do. All 3 of them. They're my legacy. Not the territory or the title." Selene felt tears prick her eyes. This man, this strong, fierce, complicated man she'd bonded to. He never failed to surprise her with his depth. "They're lucky to have you as their father," she said softly. "We're all lucky to have each other." Leif pulled her closer, careful of the sleeping pup between them. "And whatever comes, challenges, politics, prophecies, we face it as a family." "Together," Selene agreed. They stood at the window as the moon climbed higher, bathing the room in silver light. Oren shifted in his sleep, returning to human form, his small face peaceful. He looked so normal like this, so ordinary. But Selene knew better now, knew that her son was extraordinary in ways the world hadn't seen in generations, knew that his power would shape pack dynamics for decades to come, knew that every decision she and Leif made would ripple outward, affecting not just their family, but their entire pack. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt ready, because she wasn't doing this alone. She had Leif beside her, strong and steady. She had Asher and Ronan, bright and brave. She had a pack that loved them, elders who guided them, wolves who would protect their family with their lives. And most importantly, she had Oren. This small miracle of a child who shifted forms like breathing and called wolves to him without trying. This baby who would grow into something magnificent if they could just keep him safe long enough. "What are you thinking?" Leif murmured. "That I'm glad it's you," Selene said. "Glad I have you beside me for all of this. Glad our sons have you as their father. The feeling is mutual." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Now come to bed. He'll be hungry again in a few hours, and you need rest." Selene let him guide her back to bed, let him settle the furs around them, let herself relax into his embrace. Oren slept in his bassinet beside them, one tiny hand curled into a fist, his breathing deep and even. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Other packs watching, political maneuvering, the constant weight of keeping her extraordinary son safe while letting him be ordinary. But tonight, they were just a family. A mother, a father, and their 3 sleeping sons. For tonight, that was enough. For tonight, they were simply happy. And in the moonlight streaming through the window, Selene could almost believe that happy was all they'd ever need to be. Subscribe to hear more stories about the wolves of North Vale and the extraordinary family at its heart. Ring the bell so you never miss an upload. and join our membership for exclusive behind-the-scenes content and early access to new stories. Tell me in the comments, what do you think Oren's greatest power will be as he grows? And where are you watching from today? Until next time, may your own pack bonds stay strong.